Hello, and welcome back to yet another exciting week in the stock market. This episode is going to be a little different, since the only news that I'm going to talk about this week is the annual meeting from Berkshire Hathaway. So if you're not familiar with Berkshire Hathaway, that is Warren Buffett's investment company, and this is their webpage. Look at how simple it is. There's no fancy details, no fancy colors, no nothing. That is just what needs to be there. So without further ado, let's jump in and look at what the meeting was all about. So there was 4 topics to this meeting. First, Warren Buffett's presentation, then there was the Q1 results and which action they have taken during April. Then there was the formal meeting, and fourthly, there was questions from the audience where Becky Quick from CNBC presented those questions. I will of course leave a link in the description to the full live stream, which was found at Yahoo Finance. It was close to 6 hours, so I think it's reasonable for me to try and summarize it, but I will highly encourage you to go in and at least watch Warren Buffett's presentation. So let's highlight some of the things which Warren Buffett is talking about in his 1.5 hour presentation. He likes to put things into perspective, so he goes through history and compares the current COVID-19 situation with other big events like the Civil War in 1861 to 1865, the Second World War, the Cuban crisis, the 9/11 and the 2009. It goes without saying that of course these times were tough times for the stock market, but instead of focusing too much of the price for a given stock, what you should focus on is the earnings in the particular business. So if the earnings are still holding up, if there still is a positive outlook for the companies, then you should keep those companies in your portfolio. He also mentioned how a commission was established in 1955 to investigate whether or not the stock market was too expensive. And here Benjamin Graham, Warren Buffett's teacher, also the writer of the very famous book, The Intelligent Investor, went and held a speech to the Congress, and here he said the famous words, "The stock market is high, but not as high as it looks." So after looking into the history, he sums up and calls the virus an interruption of growth, and that America will prevail. He actually reaches the conclusion, which comes as no surprise when you have followed Warren Buffett for years, that he is a big believer in the American economy and the American stock market. So the conclusion he reaches is, never bet against America. And by the way, I love these slides. I mean, in the beginning of the interview, Warren Buffett says that he have never used slides before, but it is never too late to learn new tricks. This is truly remarkable when you hear it from a man of such an age, that you should constantly seek to learn new things and that you should constantly be curious. And look at how simplistic it is. There's nothing to distract you, there's simply just one very precise point. He then moves on to a subject which he says might be a bit controversial and would perhaps trigger a lot of questions from the audience when he presents this from 1776. "We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equally." He then moves to this slide where it's clear from the data that not all men are created equally, since it took 131 years until women were granted the right to vote for countries' leaders. It then took 61 years until a woman was allowed to join the 8 males in the Supreme Court. In the meantime, 33 men have been appointed, and this is not even mentioning the issue with slavery and the issues with people of a different skin color. So it is very clear from the facts that not all men were created equally. He then talks about how the country has improved, but there's still a lot of room for further improvement. He then moves on by leaving this rather controversial subject and then doing it classic Warren Buffett style to talk about how it is better to own stocks rather than government bonds, which are paying 1.5%, while the inflation is 2%, and why it, for most investors, is better to own a wide range of the market instead of specific stocks. He then gives a huge thank you to Jerome Powell, Chairman of the Federal Reserve, for acting fast and for being very determined with the mentality to do whatever it takes. Since it was very clear to Warren Buffett that we would have been in the same situation as in 2009 with no liquidity if it wasn't for the very swift action from the Federal Reserve with this mentality to do whatever it takes to keep the liquidity in the market. He then moves on to topic number 2, the Q1 results and the April actions. I will just focus on the April actions. Since he has sold all his airline stocks, he admits that he was wrong. Not at the time when he was buying, there he was not wrong, but due to this virus situation, he was wrong and paid too much for them. So they have sold all their airline stocks with a huge loss. So the 4 biggest airline companies in the United States has been wiped out of their portfolio. It's not because the management is doing a poor job. It's not because they were not driven well. It's simply due to this virus situation, which has changed the business and has changed the business for such a long time that Warren Buffett has lost his belief in the earnings for these companies going forward, and that is why they have sold their entire stake. So I will skip topic number 3, the formal meeting, since that is a lot of formalities around the meeting. There's some voting going on and some other stuff which is relevant if you hold Berkshire Hathaway, but since I do not, I will just skip it. If we then move to topic number 4, questions from the audience, I would like to focus the attention to the airline companies. Since I previously had Delta Airlines inside my portfolio, which I have also decided to sell due to exactly the same reason as Warren Buffett, since I do not believe that they are going to be profitable in the foreseeable future due to this virus. The way that you are running an airline company has simply significantly changed, and I do not know where this is going to go. Or stated differently, that I have lost faith in the company, and as I have mentioned in episode 2, the guidelines, when you lose faith in a company, then you should definitely consider selling. Then there is of course the obvious question to Warren Buffett: when should we buy stocks, since he is holding $126 billion in cash? And he answers the way that he always does: I have no clue to what the stock market will do half a year, 2 years, or 3 years from now. So when I see a good deal, then we will buy, because in 20 to 30 years from now, we will be better off. I know that there is a lot of other questions which we haven't covered. I will simply skip those, since I think we have covered which is most relevant for the viewers of this channel. But as I mentioned in the beginning, I will highly encourage you to go in and watch Warren Buffett's presentation, since there's so much knowledge there. I mean, despite the fact that the guy is 89 years old, he is still doing an amazing job, and you will almost always learn something new when you listen to him. He is really good at putting things into a different perspective, and you can really hear when he's talking that there is so much knowledge and so much experience when he is expressing himself. So that was a lot of information regarding the annual meeting at Berkshire Hathaway. It was truly a special one, since there was no one present in the audience. The room is usually completely packed, and it was also special since Charlie Munger was not there. I think it's the first time in more than 40 years that those two guys are not together when they're doing their presentation. So in many ways, very special. But now, let's turn the focus into my portfolio and see what has happened within the week. So the first thing we notice is that the portfolio is up $700 since last week. This is not a purely capital gain, since I have actually added $250 into Cardinal Health. This is a mixture of dividends that I have received and new cash that I have applied since we have entered a new month. And since we have entered a new month, we can also go in and take a closer look at the dividends tab, because now we can see that my total dividends for April was $203, and already 1st of May I have received $6.86. Those were paid out by LTC Properties. They are paying out every single month, despite the fact that they are down more than 28%. So last week I actually forgot to mention, if we take a closer look here, at Bank of America, despite the fact that they are down more than 30%, they have declared a dividend which is in line with previous, which is payable for June 26. This means that if the stock is still at this level, then I will be able to buy a bigger piece in the company for the dividends which I have received, which is actually really nice for the long-term investor like me. So that covered all the investing related news for this week. I just want to highlight my banner: spend your time wisely, let your money do the heavy lifting. This is, of course, unless you are one of the strongest men on the planet, like Hafthor Julius Bjørnson, the Icelandic strongman, who is most famously known for playing the Mountain in Game of Thrones, since he yesterday set a new world record in the deadlift for lifting 501 kilograms. That's truly amazing. So unless you are as strong as him, I suggest you start spending your time wisely and let your money do the heavy lifting. So that concludes yet another exciting week in the stock market. As always, feel free to like, comment and subscribe, and until I see you next Sunday, bye!